Hi there. This is how to create a product vision for Product School. I'm Tanza Coinju. I am a product person, and I'm really excited to give this webinar today to talk to you about product vision. Just a little bit about me. I've spent a lot of time thinking about different aspects of product vision and how you can create your own product vision. And I want to share some of the lessons I've learned, typically the hard way, with you. My experience, as you can see, kind of spans from working in things like M&A, where you're thinking through how to sell one company to another company based on that shared vision they can have together, working to actually implement that vision as the chief of staff to the CEO at a startup called MediaMath. That's an ad tech startup. And then kind of in a more traditional product manager role at startups and now at Dropbox, where I spend a lot of time thinking and leading teams on how they can create product vision. So one of the things you learn when you become a PM, and I want to talk a little bit about my philosophy here, is kind of like that leap and what you kind of do on a day-to-day. I like to think of PMs and my general product philosophy is around PMs and product as general contractors. So really, what they are, this is a comic I love. You're kind of Snoopy in the corner, and they're really ready to help out in all aspects of kind of like building this house. And so they understand the trade-offs between kind of the V-shaped roof you see them making for this little doghouse and like a flat roof. And like a contractor, they'll need a vision for the house they want to build to help rally the team there to kind of build it and set some direction. So let's talk about vision, and let's talk about the things that we'll be going through today. First off, we'll be talking about what does product vision really mean. We'll then be talking about why it's important. We'll talk about how to create your own product vision. And lastly, and really importantly, we'll talk about some tips and tricks for how you can sell your vision after you've created it. Now, if you want to think about product vision, it's important to kind of think about this lesson here. And this is one of my favorite quotes. It says, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endlessness of the sea. I think that's a really great quote, and it really speaks to what the heart of what you're trying to do with a product vision. You're really trying to provoke some emotion and that kind of endless yearning feeling that you want your teammates and other people and your customers all to feel kind of when they experience that product vision. I think as product managers, we often can get a little in the weeds and focus on the details of that vision instead of kind of this yearning aspect, which is really what excites people. So what does product vision really mean? I think one of the really important key elements is to try to break down product vision into kind of more specific categories. When people say product vision, they're actually usually referring to a couple different parts. One is kind of truly in the traditional definition of vision. That's like the future you want to create or build in 3 to 5 years. What's different in the world? It's really kind of more the what, like painting that picture. And then often you have strategy, and strategy is really how are you going to achieve this vision? Like what are the tools? What's your niche, your competitive advantage, your way to achieve this vision? And so I think often when people say product vision, they're really focused on the left on just the vision, but obviously strategy is a really important component, and obviously sometimes people kind of use these words together, and really what they want with a product vision is they want a vision and a strategy with it. And, kind of the clearest way to set the strategy, though, is it really should come from that vision, right? So you paint that vision of that world you want to build, and then you can kind of pick the right strategy on how you're going to achieve it. And that's some really important sequencing to think about as you kind of set your own vision. So let's talk about setting the vision altitude. I think it's really important to think about 3 different levels of vision altitude. One is company vision, the second is product vision, and the third is kind of area or group vision. So what does this look like? Typically the company vision, again, is that larger type of change you want in the world that's set by someone like the CEO. That influences the product direction, but also the direction of the entire company, right? It influences the customer support team. It influences the sales team. It influences, much wider. Typically that ends up getting distilled down to some sort of product vision, so that future promise to customers. Someone like a chief product officer might try to distill that down for you. And then that really kind of boils down to kind of what I'll call supportive product components. And those, are typically grouped by areas or functions. That's an individual PM. And that's what, many of you, and certainly what I do on a regular basis is focused on a specific area of a product, whether that's, the online experience and just portions of it, or different slicings of it. And so to give you a sense for how this looks in real life at a company like Dropbox, you have the Dropbox vision. So that's design a more enlightened way of working. It kind of translates down to a product vision that has us tying everything together. And that's really kind of the core product premise. And then for me, focused on an area, Dropbox, around notifications and feeds, right? That's my specific area. That message translates to a vision, something more around transforming activity information to helpful insights. And that's really kind of this longer term picture that I'm trying to build at Dropbox. And that's the sense for how these things flow together. So again, really important that the company vision sets the overall direction. You'll notice is a really specific choice I've made with this inverted pyramid, that really this all does flow from the top. And that product vision, the reason that becomes important is that's that North Star, so that all these individual product teams underneath them can follow and kind of row in the same direction. Every single product manager is creating their own kind of mini vision within their area, but it all is tied and directly ladders up to the product vision. And that's kind of a really important point, specifically at larger tech companies, Dropbox and Google's of the world. It becomes a lot harder and a lot more to struggle is on that alignment from these many, individual and talented product teams, and how they kind of ladder into an overall product vision. So I'll give you, some other examples in real life on, some nuance here. So company vision can equal product vision for one product companies. Like I said earlier, vision and strategy often get mixed up. Either way, you'll need them both in order to kind of present a coherent story to someone. And often, startups struggle with like limited customer knowledge. And so just to give you an example of my experience with this at Policy Genius. So one, initially Policy Genius is a online insurance company where you can go online and buy insurance. And initially we were kind of a one product company that was really focused on, the bulk of our business was life insurance. And so a lot of the company vision was the product vision in some sense. The second thing to think about was, we had a very limited product team and no official kind of documented vision. And so again, unique startups in some ways where, that you're very limited in the existing documentation that you have, and you kind of have very limited product folks helping support that vision. The third thing that was really interesting about our experience with vision at Policy Genius was the majority of our time and effort was spent discovering and then eventually building around the customer vision. And so that vision really related. We learned through discovery and research and product launches that vision was all around easy. And so, one of the more unique challenges I think to startups are like the more limited customer knowledge or market shifting that they experience. So you may be asking, does vision really matter? Will this make a difference to me as I start a career in product or while I'm a product manager? And the answer is absolutely yes. It's why you get hired. Example here from Google, like product vision, you look at, almost any large scale job description, it is a key criteria of why you get hired. It's also how you get promoted. So when you're joining, I think it's the single biggest difference between becoming a junior PM and a more senior PM. So going from, different individual contributor levels into higher levels, like I see 4 or 5 at companies, is really about shifting your responsibility from kind of leveraging insights into driving vision. And I think it's a skill that is really applicable. It also creates a ton of leverage. I think it's the highest leverage activity that a product manager can do, is to have a really clear product vision and strategy. And I'm not the only one to say that. Folks like Marty Keegan, a great example of ones who kind of, I think, feel similarly. And why do I think it creates so much leverage? I think there are really 3 reasons. First off, I think it unifies your team. It really helps them all row in the same direction. And so, that really can help accelerate your momentum. The second reason why I think it creates leverage is it unleashes others to work. So as a product manager, there's often so much you need to manage and take care of and do. But when you're able to create a really clear product vision, it helps others in your team do some of that work. So you no longer have to do all the heavy lifting of like thinking through all the different features and roadmap and implications of what you're doing. You've essentially, unlocked and unleashed other people to share that burden and help do some of the work, because you no longer have to be directive of what you need. There's now an agreed upon vision. And the third is it just creates stability. A lot changes in tech companies, and being able to create a really stable way and method for the team helps build consistency and helps build comfort, and eventually I think helps build again, velocity and speed. So how do you create your product vision? So first off, I think a lot of it is about understanding context. So stepping back to understand the context. Great graphic here on the right, 6 blind men and an elephant. There's this expression that product managers are context managers. They really, and I think this is really true. For example, as this kind of general contractor, you are, when you're building this house as a product manager, you need to understand the context of the plumbing of the house, of the, various aspects of it. And so just like this elephant, if you stand too close to it, you might not see the whole picture. And so product managers typically need to step back and, look at the entire shape of what they're dealing with in order to, really understand how to drive a product vision. Clarifying the vision altitude, we talked about this earlier. This is really around understanding what level of vision you're looking to drive. I think this is actually a common thing that comes up in product interviews. I've gotten questions in the past, for example, of, you're at Airbnb, how do you set product vision? And I think it's worth thinking about clarifying for a moment, what part of the vision are you setting? Are you the CEO setting the company vision? Are you the CPO setting the product vision? Or are you perhaps working in a segment like Airbnb's Luxe rental segment? And are you setting the vision for that segment? And often it can be helpful to get that clarification and even restate once you have, okay, I'm the Luxe new product lead. Restate the Airbnb vision and then kind of connect your vision that you're presenting in your answer to that kind of larger vision. Other things to think about are understanding and challenging existing assumption and biases. I think this often is the case with startups where you have a small set of teams. A lot of the founders or previous engineers or product folks there will have just inherent natural biases that come out in the product. Someone who's maybe very analytical will tend to try to build a more analytical product. And so really understanding those assumptions as you think through your vision is really helpful, I think, especially at startups. because it's just there's fewer people, and so there's a higher degree of, I think, potential for like bias to be reflected in the actual product experience. And the last thing about, of course, is just bringing the right team along the way. Creating a product vision isn't a solo mission. It involves a group. So what is good? What does good and bad product vision look like? Just some principles here on what Master Yoda and Baby Yoda look like. I know Baby Yoda isn't technically an apprentice, but I thought it was a great excuse to use that photo because he's so darn cute. But when you look at Baby Yoda, what are the type of things that Baby Yoda product, an apprentice product vision looks like? Generally, it's vague, it's overly broad, it's kind of buzzwordy. It just really doesn't allow people to feel like there's direction and make decisions from it. So there's really limited use, and it often doesn't inspire anyone. Think about that yearning for the sea. It falls flat. People don't get excited about it. Whereas Yoda offers very clear vision that's very specific. He's careful with his or her word choice. It really helps set directions. You can make decisions based on that vision. You have a clearer understanding of what that is. And it's a little audacious. It should feel inspiring. And really what you want to strive is to be the Yoda. And so we're going to talk a little bit about tools to help you craft that vision. There's 3 tools we'll go through. One is, this is kind of a very traditional tool, Geoffrey Moore's vision template, that kind of goes through, kind of a classic user problem scenario. The real notable aspects here are, I think this template is really helpful in thinking about positioning and framing, really focuses on differentiation of your vision or your product from others. And it can be really helpful if that's something you're focused on. The next tool we'll talk about is working backwards with a press release. This is popularized by companies like Amazon. This technique involves the team or product manager writing a press release when they start exploring the feature. So before it's ever launched, what you do is you write a press release that you would want to share with the world when your product or feature is launched. And the noteworthy aspects of this approach are, it brings together problem, solution, customer. So, these press releases often cover the problem it's solving. It kind of talks about the solution. You often include things like customer quotes. When you're writing these are obviously made up customer quotes, but really kind of speaks to the overall vision that you're trying to do. Amazon, for example, did this when they launched AWS way back, and I think there's stories of them going through 20 to 30 different edits of this press release before they ever actually started work on this feature. And so why I think this is noteworthy is it really kind of hits that customer pain point and brings these together. An example of how I use this at Dropbox is, we, for example, have at Dropbox, when you launch a feature, you often will send an email out to our product teams that's called "Oh shoot," and so you do this after every meaningful feature launch. And so what I think about is how I can imagine writing that email out to that group before I actually launch the next feature, or launch a new team, or launch a vision document. What does that need to look like? And so that exercise can be really helpful in clarifying what a vision looks like. Third tool we'll talk about is kind of, again, a more traditional, this is the Products Lab vision and milestone template. And so what you'll see here is what this is notable is it does a really good job of kind of being fill in the blank and being very specific on things you want to drive. So in 10 years at Uber, we will be the cheaper alternative to owning or taking public transportation. Now that's a really lofty goal, and I think the benefit of a framework like this helps be really specific and helps you be aspirational. The other components here on challenge and current state and target condition can really help add a lot of context. And so just another tool that you can use to help drive your product vision. Lastly, we'll talk about selling the vision. And let's talk about some tips to help you sell that vision. So first off, I'm going to give you 3 tips. 1, lead with a provocation. Definitely a lesson I've learned over the last 3 or 4 years is leading with a provocation. So be opinionated, directive, and proposal based. If you are a product manager here and you're responsible for driving this vision, it is not necessarily going to be through complete consensus. It is more helpful typically to start with a proposal, to start with a vision, to start with an opinion, to start with a directive that you can get someone else to react to. Rather than starting with a blank page. It can be very scary to try to build and co-create a completely blank vision, or a vision completely on a blank page. So I think the fear people sometimes have is, am I being too opinionated? The answer is no. It really helps progress the conversation. As long as you're being respectful and you're incorporating people's feedback along the way, your teammates will appreciate you starting the conversation with a proposal or an opinion that helps them have something to react to. The second tip to think about is how you can pre-sell with stakeholders. So building alignment with kind of sneak peeks can be really helpful. At Dropbox, for example, there's lots of stakeholders from other teams to more senior management. And having sneak peeks with them to kind of bring them along the journey can be really helpful in building alignment before any kind of big grand reveal. It's kind of like, you should think of it as you do agile development, where you kind of want to iterate and like test a little bit with the market. And so when you do these sneak peeks, you're often able to test with stakeholders or like senior leadership, how they react to this and what their concerns are. And it really helps like build alignment. So, you don't kind of do kind of a waterfall approach where you spend 6 months, build this great vision, and then kind of try to do this grand reveal, but for 3 other reasons that you don't have context to, your bosses either aren't and teams aren't aligned, or there's been a change you weren't aware of that kind of impacts your vision. And the third tip I'll give you is, don't make it personal. If the vision doesn't work, that's okay. It doesn't mean you were wrong. It just means that the assumptions or the timing underlying that vision are wrong. So, it may, that proposal you start with may have looked like one thing and then end up being something else, and that's okay. And it's also okay if the vision doesn't work. It doesn't necessarily need to be your vision, quote unquote. It's the team's vision for this area. And so if it's wrong, that's okay. You just, you need to be honest about what assumptions are underlying that vision, but don't take it personal, and kind of like gravitate towards, what works with your customers. Lastly, if you're having trouble starting, some things to think about and questions to ask yourself are, do I understand my role and scope? So that's at vision altitude, right? Do I understand what part of the sandbox I'm playing in? Am I creating company vision, product vision, specific area? If it's an area, what part of the area should I be thinking about? Is it just my core set of role in this part, or is there other things that I should be thinking about? Can I articulate the problem space? Like, how well do I know about the core user problems? How well do I know that the emotions I want to drive with my user, right? I mentioned the example earlier of Policy Genius and our thoughts around and discovery around making things easy, right? That was like the core emotional need that our users have, was like, it needed to just be easy, because insurance is not something you ever want to deal with or think about. It's a chore. And so, if you can articulate that, it can be really helpful in driving a vision. If you can't, you may need to do some more user research, testing, those type of things to try to like develop that knowledge and that kind of muscle. And the third is, do you know what's happening in the market? Do you have an understanding of the competitive dynamics, adjacent companies? Do you have a good sense of those trends? And so doing these 3 things, if you're kind of stuck and asking yourself, if you have good answers, these 3 things can help you unlock how to build your product vision. So again, if you want to build the ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endlessness of the sea. With that, thanks very much for joining my talk about how to create product vision.